I think I have here the Florentine Codex that has, well, Florentine Codex has 3 volumes, but there are several scenes of sacrifice that if you like to get.
Historian Carmen Aguilera is an expert on these ancient books.
So, which one are you going to show me first?
Well, I think the Florentine picture, because it's very illustrative of how 16th century people represented human sacrifice. Here we have a picture of sacrifice by taking out the heart of the captive. Of course, you see here the pyramid.
This simple ink drawing penned by a European scribe not long after the conquest clearly depicts the Aztecs sacrificing their enemies. The question is whether there are any references to Spaniards being sacrificed. The 1,600 originals of these fragile codices are held in vaults to protect them from light damage.
See his first publication after 500 years. At last
But here, in a facsimile of the Florentine Codex, Carmen thinks she has just what Elizabeth is looking for.
This is the 12th book of the Florentine Codex, and about the conquest.
Buried within these 500 pages, they finally find the evidence they were looking for.
Yes.
Oh, you found it. Instead of showing the heads of the Indians, it shows horses' heads and human heads.
This tiny, simple illustration reveals 2 significant clues. Firstly, horse heads. We know that the Aztecs didn't have horses, so they could belong only to the conquistadors. But the most significant clue is in the depiction of the human heads on the skull rack. These heads are clearly bearded. The Aztecs' local enemies had little facial hair, but the Spanish wore beards. Historical evidence that backs up what the finds at Zultepec have been suggesting, that the Spanish were sacrificed. But was this purely for religious reasons? Warfare expert Ross Hassick believes there could also have been more cynical intentions at play. That there were in fact political motives behind the Aztecs' sacrificial rituals.
It's painted as religious, but in fact it was being used for political purposes. And the primary purpose of this was to solidify the empire.
It is well documented that the Aztec warriors terrorized their weaker neighbors and that the empire was governed by intimidation. They oppressed their neighbors and through a system of taxation strengthened their wealth and superiority. But in order to maintain this system of control, you have to be able to enforce it. This, Ross believes, was the purpose of human sacrifice.
When they had an opportunity, the Aztecs would take captives and make a public display of them. They actually took the skin off the face and their hands, tanned it, and sent it around to a lot of these wavering cities. The whole purpose of this kind of display of a sacrifice and display is to intimidate your friends and your enemies. And so the Aztecs would have killed these people publicly, displayed their remains publicly as a way of ensuring the loyalty and fealty of a lot of towns that may have been wavering in their support.
Could this have been the motive behind what happened at Zultepec?
It maybe really was this incident after Cortez first fled in 1520, where they had all these Spaniards and they were able to sacrifice them at leisure, display them publicly without fear of any reprisals, and then send these materials around to a lot of their allies.
But the burials at Zultepec have one last revelation. and it's the darkest secret of all.
Máscaras de piedra. ¿De qué
Here at
material son
archaeologist
estas?
Enrique Martinez's storeroom lies thousands of artifacts found at Zultepec, from obsidian blades to ritual burial pots. All these have been painstakingly pieced together and catalogued to help build a picture of what happened at Zultepec. Amongst all these precious finds, Enrique has discovered pieces like this stone chamber, used for the placement of a human heart as part of ritual sacrifice. But there's another revelation buried deep in this storeroom, suggesting the Aztecs didn't stop at human sacrifice. The bones from Zultepec have been carefully studied for clues as to what happened to them.
Once the captives had been sacrificed, their bodies were dismembered, and then the bones ritually prepared. These leg bones indicate that firstly, the flesh was stripped off, using sharp obsidian blades before being specially treated. They were put in pots full of lime, like this, and that burnt off the excess flesh and preserved them. Then the warriors were given the bones to take home and display as trophies.
Some of the bones appear to have been cooked at a very high temperature.
These bones have been incinerated, cooked as a part of a sacrificial ritual, maybe to the god of fire.
The treatment of all these bones suggests that this was not just a sacrificial killing, but it was part of another far darker ritual.
I believe these bones have been chewed and eaten. They display all the hallmarks of having been cooked up and consumed by the Aztecs.
We can see some of the marks. These marks actually are of human beings when the person chewed the bone. And we know that the marrow was ritually eaten. It was taken out and eaten.
The shocking revelation that the eating of human flesh, cannibalism, happened here at Zultepec is a controversial one. But there are codices that illustrate the Aztecs cooking up and eating their enemies.
There were also rituals in which human flesh was eaten, if you like, the ritual kind of taking of their strength or the consuming of their power. Now, whether this was done to strike dread into the hearts of the Spanish is not quite clear, or whether it was done because the Aztecs felt that it might drain the power of the Spaniards. Maybe they felt very strongly that they had upset the gods, and the only way that they could appease them would be to offer the highest form of sacrifice, if you like, the hardest form of sacrifice, which would be to capture a Spaniard or his horse and sacrifice it, is open to question. But certainly sacrifice of Spaniards did occur.
The widely accepted view is that the conquistadors took on the might of the Aztec nation and destroyed their civilization with little resistance. But then history is always written by the victors.
I think it's important because it tells an aspect of the story that is not often told. One of those really is to perhaps lay bare the myth that the Spaniards just simply moved in and the Aztecs rolled over and, if you like, just gave up. Because we know that they didn't. They fought hard